You just don't ever hear about them. They didn't talk about them then, and they don't talk about them now. It was interesting once it became kind of public knowledge that I was looking for them, how many people contacted me saying, oh, well, we had one, or my mom and dad had one. I'm Steve Quesinberry. I'm the history department chair at Noonan High School. I've been teaching here for 33 years. I've documented 17 fallout shelters in Coweta. I was at a faculty meeting one day, and myself and another history teacher were talking about the fallout and the fear of atomic warfare and stuff like that, and one of the math teachers overheard us. She looked at us and said, my father's got one of those fallout shelters in his backyard. And we went out there to see it. He was still alive, and he's telling us how he put it in and how he installed them for other neighbors of his up and down the road. And that kind of got it going for me. To view these shelters and document them, and which I just found like a really fascinating piece of forgotten history.
The best protection of all is the special shelter.
Will give you virtually complete protection from lethal radiation.
Once the Russians get the atomic bomb in 1949 and the face-off with the United States during the Cold War, there's more and more worries that we're going to blow each other to smithereens.
It would be a good idea to go right now to your local civil defense office to secure plans for the type of shelter you want.
The civil defense programs actually began during World War II. I guess you could almost say they're the forerunner of the Department of Homeland Security. They were just part of the Pentagon, and they encouraged people in World War II to like black out their windows so an enemy plane couldn't get a fix on where they were or drop a bomb. After World War II, though, and the Cold War beginning, the civil defense changes a little bit, and they changed their focus to surviving nuclear war.
Withdrawal from key target cities or fallout areas may be ordered by local civil defense authority.
Civil defense printed pamphlets and brochures trying to encourage people to build what we would refer to as fallout shelters, not bomb shelters. They're not going to save you from an atomic bomb if it lands nearby. They tried to encourage the fathers to build them, and the mothers to stock them with food, games, stuff like that for the children.
And national survival requires that each one of us assume his share of the responsibility. There is work to be done, and each must cooperate.
All right, these are things printed by the Civil Defense, family shelter designs, instructions for filling the water storage container, dated August 1962. Home protection exercises, practice evacuating like a fire drill type thing. This is the type of thing that the Office of Civil Defense did. Anywhere I see one, I try to pick it up.
How'd you get this again?
The mayor saved it for me. And one of them is still in his office, and I've got the other one.
And you never opened up these crackers?
No. Most of this, all these things right here would have been in like a municipal type shelter that the local governments had put together. So it tells you how to fill, to dispense, and then to reuse as a commode. All right, I found 3 different types of shelters in Coweta. I labeled one a culvert type. It's like a huge tube where you go down a ladder into it. They were just abandoned. I mean, there wasn't anything for the most part in there other than in some cases trash. You get air through a big hand crank. I also found what I called basement types, where they put them in under their house or in their basement and fixed it so that it would work. The basement types are all different. There's hardly any straight characteristics, except that you're supposed to have a turn. the fallout, the radiation was supposed to be like a bullet. It goes straight, so that if radiation does come in through the entrance, then it won't be able to make the turn. Then I found a couple of municipal types, which are more like mass shelters. The one I think is most notable is the one that's in Wadsworth Auditorium. It's just a big room. There's no turns, nothing. I guess they just wanted people to feel good and go in there.
Almost any kind of shelter can reduce the danger of radiation. An ordinary frame house like this, outside the area of blast and fire, will provide some protection. A basement shelter will provide even more.
The thing was that they didn't keep any count on how many of those shelters there actually were. There is no statistic. Nobody really knows how many there were, because if you built one, you tried to keep it quiet. You didn't advertise it to your neighbors, because if the worst comes to worst, you don't have room where they come banging on your fallout shelter door trying to get in. The guy had built it with his brothers. They told me that they planned on taking a gun down into the shelter with them. And so even if you do survive, what's the world going to be like when you come out? And it's an interesting dichotomy, because the 1950s is seen as this really great time. I mean, it's a time of conformity and everything's great. The economy's booming, or there's no war. But kind of underneath, there is that fear of the possible nuclear holocaust. I think they're significant because they're a piece of history that I really think has been lost. You know, world history teachers, American history teachers have a tendency to talk on a grand scale. Washington, D.C., you know, World War II, everything's big. And this relates it to their local area. Their neighbors, people they knew, or people their parents or grandparents knew, actually thought it was so important that they put these in. And so I think it's more and more important that the local history be integrated as much as possible with the bigger picture history.
The instinct of survival is inherent in all of us.
The best protection of all is the special shelter.